decentralized application. What we'll be doing today is we'll look at how to read contracts using Wagmi and how to upload. So I would go ahead to share my screen. So we have Next.js for decentralized applications part 2. All right. As I said, we'll be looking at uploading files to IPFS and interacting with smart contracts using Wagmi. So we'll see how to read from our contracts that we have written and also how to write to those particular contracts. Now, one contract hook in Wagmi is the use read contract. What this hook allows you to do is it allows you to read data on smart contracts from a view of pure, let's say, read-only function. Now, they can only read the state of the contract, but they cannot make any changes to it. So, whenever you have a pure or view function, you can always make use of the read contract to read the particular state, that is the value of that's rendered or returned at that particular point in time. Now, since read-only methods do not change the state of the contract, they do not require any gas to be executed and can be called by any user without the need to pay for gas. Okay, so the use read contract, just like how the name sounds, is used for reading data. Now, if you want to write data, there is the use write contract. But before we get into the use write contract, you need to also understand that the hook, the use read hook, returns loading and error states. So if you are trying to read a contract and there's an error, there is also a state that will be returned. Now that state is going to carry a particular error. So as front-end developers, you're making use of this loading and error states. You can actually know when to return a modal at any point. You know when to throw an error message for the user. Now, this can be used to display a loading indicator while the data is being fetched, or an error message if contract execution reverts. So that was the explanation of use read contract. Moving on to use write contract. This hook allows you to mutate the data. That is, you can change the data on the smart contract. You can update the data on the smart contract from a payable or non-payable function. This type of functions require gas to be executed, as a transaction is broadcasted in order to change the state. Now, example of functions that use this is in our ERC token, we have transfer from. Now, all of this requires that data is mutated, right? So you can make use of the write contract to call functions like that. But if you want to read the balance of an address, if you want to read the total supply from an ERC token, all of that you can make use of the use read contract, because you are reading the states. You don't have to make any mutation or updates to the smart contract. Now, in Wagmi, there's also the use simulate contract. This use simulate contract is in the latest version of Wagmi. The previous name of this hook is use prepare contract. What it does is it works on the hand with use write contracts. It is used for simulating or validating a contract interaction. So if you are going to make a call to a contract, what this use simulate contract hook does is it makes the call first, and then in a scenario where there's an error or there's like a potential failure that's going to happen that will arise from the contract interaction, it's going to return such errors or warnings to you. and then before you actually call the main contract. So this hook function ensures the validity of a contract interaction by identifying and addressing potential failures arising from incorrect configurations or invalid values. So, for example, if a particular function has 3 parameter arguments and then you pass in 2, whenever you run this use simulate contract, it's going to return an error for you. It employs error or warning mechanisms to alert users to such issues, thereby mitigating the likelihood of contract failure. So in calling your user rights contract, making in Wagmi, you have to call this use simulate contract first. It will simulate the contract interaction. If everything works fine, you can go ahead to call it. If not, it returns the error or warning for you, and you can undo such issues from there. All right. So that's it for the theoretical part. It's quite short, and that's because the next part is IPFS. We know what IPFS is. We treated that. That was beginning of this bootcamp. So what we'll be doing today is we have seen how to upload to IPFS using the address. But what we'll be learning today is how to upload to IPFS from our decentralized application, making use of your code and all. We'll still be making use of the same platform we used, which is NFT storage. We'll still make use of that, but this time around, we would make such calls from our code, and we don't have to interact with the UI. So in continuation of our last class, where we initiated a Next.js application, and okay, so we did the setup for our Next.js application in our last class, and we saw how to connect, making use of our Rainbow Kit, Wagmi, and how to interact. We even interacted with some of the hooks. So what we'll be doing now is we'll be looking at how to read from a contract first, and then we'll take a look at how to write to a contract, and lastly, we'll now move on to uploading to IPFS. So for those of us that already have our Next.js setup, okay, so I'm just going to start this server, which is npm run dev. So my server started. So let me just like structure this. Okay, so far we're displaying the connected address of the user and also a button to disconnect. Right. Okay, if you want to read from a contract, there's an interface you need to follow. So firstly, you import the hook from Wagmi, use read contract. And when you are calling the hook, you need to pass in the necessary values and configuration. So this can be structured to get our data. And you can also get your loading state. It's loading. Okay, so let me increase. Yeah. So there are various values you can get from reading your contract. You can get the loading state, you can get error, right? You can get this error that is this going to return a Boolean value. So there are lots of possible values you can get. So all of this, the necessary ones we are going to be making use of is data and its loading. Now the data is going to return the value from the contract, and this loading is going to, we will use this loading for when the call is being made or when it's trying to still read from the contract. Now, the first thing you need to pass is what? The ABI of the contract. So you can pass in the ABI. I believe at this point we know how to get the ABI from smart contracts, which is quite simple. So what I would do is I would want us to make use of the ERC20 ABI. And that's because I know we are very familiar with ERC20 at this particular point. So we would try to get the ABI from the ERC token. So let me just see if I can get. Now I've compiled. Okay. ABI 5. No, so you get it from your smart contract and then you copy the ABI and store it, and then you can pass it to this smart contract. Yeah, so you can, oh yeah, you can get that from Remix or from wherever. Without that also you can get that. So from Remix, you just use copy API to clipboard and automatically it copies that. Now, huh? To get it. Yeah, I think you can use add that, right? Yeah. But probably after the class, just remind me. So I would just come back to it if you don't understand. Okay. Now I've gotten the ABI from the contracts. How do I pass this to it? So what's needed at this particular point is you can paste it here, but notice it makes the file too big because we have so many. We have so many, right? So what you can do is you can create a new folder, and you can probably pass that. Probably you can even name it contract or whatever structure you want to make use of. So let's name it contracts. Some people would put that inside utils, but you can name it, put it contract, and then you can create a new file and name it ERC20 API. Right. Inside here, you can assign the API to a variable and export the API if you want. So how do you do that? You use export your const, and then you can just say ERC. Now, with this, you have created a new file and then you have added your API. Yeah. So this is the name. So coming back to our app, like to the main file where we're working from, you can just import the API from that file. Yeah, Vim even gives you the API if you want to make use of, gives you ERC20 API if you want to make use of it. But I'm doing the custom way because for those of us that will be building our custom Solidity file, so you can easily come here and then just pass ERC20 as the API, like ERC20 API. And you see there's no error. Right. Now, the next step is which of the function name do you want to read? So you can pass function name. And let's say from our ERC20 file, let's just take a quick look at that. And you can see all of these are right functions, right functions, right functions. So let's look for a view function. Yeah, so we have allowance, but okay, let's use balance of instead. Now this is a view function. And what is the name of the function balance of? So you copy the exact name of the function and paste it inside of the function name. So function name we have balance of. Now the next thing you have to take note is this balance of, does it have arguments? That is, are you supposed to pass in necessary data like argument or parameter to it? So let me just look for balance. Okay. Now, if you check out inputs, you can see an array. Inside the array, you can see address. So it means you're supposed to pass in one. So if you see multiple objects inside of the array, you just know you have to pass in the length of the array. So if you see three, you have to pass in three parameters, and then you can always infer or know what data type you have to pass. Right now, you can see address. If it's an integer that is required, you would see the integer and the type of integer you're supposed to pass at that particular point. So to get the balance of, we need to pass in the address. Now, how do we do that? What you do is you type in args, which is like short form of argument, and then instead of you initialize an array and pass in the address. Now, I want to read the balance of the logged in user. How do I do that? Remember from the last class, from the user account hook, we are getting the address of the logged in user. So I just need to pass in the address in here. If I want to read probably a custom address, like it doesn't have to be the logged in user, it could be any address within that particular contract also. Now I've passed in the necessary arguments. The next, what is needed next is the address of the smart contract. So you would have to deploy your smart contract and pass in the address of the smart contract for it to know that it's reading from this particular smart contract. There's also the option of passing in the chain ID, but it's optional. And the reason why it's optional is because it's going to pick out the default chain ID. So if the logged in user at that particular point, the network is on its Arbitrum Sepolia, is going to pick that particular chain ID as the default and use that. But let's say the user is on another network, like Binance Smart Chain or so. You can pass in the chain ID and then it will require the user to switch to that particular chain before it can make the call. Now, so we don't need to pass in chain ID, but in scenarios where you need the user to make use of another network or chain, you can always pass in the chain ID. Moving on, the next thing is to pass in the address of the smart contract. What's the address of the smart contract that we have? So I'll just go ahead to deploy this. So we're going to deploy. Mm. So the gas fee right now is crazily high. Let me see what I have. Okay. So I have it here. All right. I've deployed this. So I would get the smart contract of the smart contract address and then paste this here. At this point, I believe this is all that we need. Now to access the value, the balance of, I can console the log. Let's console the log data. Can console the log. So I'll come back to our application connect. Yeah, let's use account one. So let's check our console. And then you can see balance of, and we can now see the value that I have. Now, first off, remember, you can see from the top, our balance of was returning undefined. And at the end, it returned a value. And that's because it was fetching at that particular point. So the default value is going to be undefined until it's done fetching. So that's where your is loading comes in place. So you can decide that, okay, while it's loading, let's render something else. And once it's done loading, we can now render the data that we have. All right. So you can always come back here and then we can now say balance of. Now in here, there are different ways to render your loading indicator. So you can always say if it's loading, let's just rename this is loading to read contracts loading. Loading. Loading balance. And then here we check if there's a data. Now this data is too generic. That is, it's too. So let's rename that to balance. Right? Yeah. So anybody reading the code can actually understand. If it doesn't need data, it's kind of generic. So it's always good to rename your data to something specific. Now we can now do balance of. So what's actually happening here is we are taking if um okay, so what's happening here is okay, so what's happening here is once the contract is loading, I'm adding a new state where I'm adding a new JSX, and then I'll say loading balance. And then in here, once there's a valid value, once there's a value that is non-null or undefined, would now render the balance. Now, there's a UX issue here, user experience issue here. Why? Is the fact that once this is loading and there's a balance, it's still going to show this. So if I want it to be that once it's loading, don't show this at all, I can always do read contract. So what's happening here is I'm checking if there's a balance, and if it's not loading, which is I'm adding this first equivalence, right? First of all, and then after that, render this. So I'll just come back to my application and I'll refresh this. So let me slow this down so we can actually see it. So is this slow because I throttled down the speed? I want us to actually see the interaction that happens as but seems like it's now too slow. Okay. Yeah, so we get notice we get balance of loading balance and then uh we have this afterwards. Hmm, sorry, pause it. So some of these errors are like script error. All right, so this is how you read from contracts, your view or pure functions, right? There's if you want to read the balance of the address, normally like Wagmi has the balance, you use balance hook. But if you want to read from your contract, a view or pure function, this is the structure you need to follow. All right. Do we have any question? Do we have any question? Okay. In absence of questions, we'll move on to the next, to which is reading contract. Now, to read contracts, remember I said we have to make use of two hooks, which is use simulate contract and use write contract. So how do they work together? We'll take a look at how the both hooks work together. So I can always come back to Wagmi and import use simulate contracts and use write contracts. Sorry, Emmanuel, your answer, or do you have any question? Okay. When you want to make use of the simulate contracts, what you do is you call the hook, and just like how you pass in the necessary values to the use read contract hook, that's how you also pass in the necessary values to the use simulate contract hook. Now, so the first thing is you pass in the ABI also. You also pass in the address, which is this. So I'll just put this, I'll create a new variable. And yeah. So I assigned the address to a variable, and you can also pass in the function name. Now, the function name, where you want to probably mutate or make a change to the data. So let's say we want to transfer a token from my account to probably another user. So this is useful in scenarios where you want to make payments in your decentralized application. That is, the user wants to buy a product from your e-commerce decentralized application, or some sort of transaction is going on. You can always make use of this transfer from. So we'll see how to make a transfer from the logged in user's address to probably another address also. So how do we do that? You would come to your API and take a look at it, look at the necessary inputs, look at the necessary what outputs is expected, and just take a look at it. Now for the inputs, we are to pass in 3 parameters, which is address, the second address. So notice the name is different. That is, the first name is what? From, and then second name is to. So using your intuition, you understand that from is where you're sending it from, and to is where you're sending it, the user, the recipient. And lastly, you now have a integer, which is amount. So how much are you sending from user A to user B? And then you would also see output. So probably in handling the response from the contract, you would actually know from your decentralized application that, okay, I should expect a what? Here we can see Boolean. So you should know you would expect a Boolean as the response in case you are listening for the response at that particular point. All right. So coming here, you say you want to make use of the transfer from. Well, we need to pass in the argument. So we use the keyword at, and then we pass in the address. So we are going to send it from the logged in user, and that will be the first address. And then we'll be sending it to another user, probably the user. So now let's show I would like us to actually do this in a dynamic way. Now we can add code the value and then probably copy a normal address and paste here. But what I want us to do is create a new input field. I believe we're all front-end developers and we know how to create input fields. And whatever value the user pass as the address would pass that as the argument and also the value. So how do we do that? So we create we're going to create two input fields, one for the address, second one for the amount the user wants to transfer. All right. So going ahead to do this, I'll create two input fields. Making use of Tailwind, we can, let me just put this on the so it doesn't. So I'll just quickly style this input field on my this order of enter address, this order of that value, right? So you can always style it according to how you want. But to save time, we'll just proceed with this. So we need our state variables to hold our value. And to do that, we can always we can also use the use state hook. And we can name address, string, an empty string, and value to be 0. What name should we give this state? We can name this form data and set that to set form data. Okay, now we have this. Initialize it to an object that has address and value. So we want it to be that whatever the user inputs as the address, we would pass that as the recipient to our simulate transfer. How do we do this? We have the unchanged props where we get the events, right? And inside of this, we can always set our form data to what event to the target the value, that is what the user is typing at that particular point. But you know, we are dealing with objects, and we can't just outrightly replace the previous value. So how do we get the previous value of our state and append a new value to it? There are different approach you can use. But a simple approach that I actually like doing is what? So you can always get the previous value whenever you're setting your state. So this pre, you can say I named it pre, that is your previous value. You can name it whatever you want. And since it's an object, I'll put in an object and then copy the previous value. I believe you all know what spread operator does. So copy the previous value and then set the field to our value. So since this handles address, I can always name this address and then pass in event.address dot value. Now we have this. It's going to update our state and it will also keep track of previous values, so it doesn't replace each other so to do the same thing for our value, like amount. So let me rename this to amount so it doesn't value is so generic. All right. So here, instead of event, instead of address, I'll change this to what? Value. So now we are getting a TypeScript error. TypeScript error of what? Type string is not assignable to type number. Why? Event.target.value is a string. Meanwhile, when we initiated our states, we assigned 0 to a value. 0 is a number. So it's trying to say, TypeScript is complaining here that type string is not assignable to type number. So this is the usefulness of TypeScript amongst many. So how do we convert this to a number? So firstly, you can always, you can decide to convert this probably by using number and then do this. Automatically, it's going to convert the string to a number. Or if it's invalid, you would actually get either a not a number none, or you get 0 to return 0 for you. Or you can do pass int, which is a JavaScript inbuilt. What this does, it converts a string to an integer, right? So depending, but you need to be careful whenever you are doing type conversions, and you need to ensure that okay, the user is going to type in a number and not text at any point. So that's where your validation comes in. You can always do your front-end validation. You can do your input type validation, and yeah. So you need to ensure as a front-end developer that you don't do type conversion for values you're not sure of. So you need to ensure and cover every scenarios that okay, this is going to be an integer, right? All right. So moving on. So because of time, I'll just proceed with that. And let me just console the log our form the data to see that we are getting the user's input at that particular point. Moving out of time. So I will just open up my console and then address. By typing a normal string, you can see I'm getting the value of whatever the user typed. And then I can do 20. So, but I can't see the value here. Reason being that our default color is white. So inside class name, I will just change this to text black, right? Yeah. So you can see whatever the user is typing at this particular point. And we can see that here. So so if as a user I want to send to my second address, all I have to do is come in here, copy my address, and then come here, paste it. Now, user pastes this. But how do you ensure there is an address? You as a front-end developer, you need to ensure that whatever the user is typing is a valid address. So you can always do your validations and ensure that the user is typing in a valid address as a front-end developer. Same thing for the numbers. You need to ensure that the user is typing in a number as your value. Okay, now moving on, we have this, and in continuation of where we stopped in the use simulate contract, the second value is going to be what? Form data dot address. Can you see? And lastly, the value is going to be what? Form data dot value. To convert this value to ethers, you can always do pass ethers for this. Pass ether. So it's going to complain because why? It's expecting a string, and then you passed in a number. So what you can do is you can always convert this. So probably our value will convert it back to a, instead of using a number, we'll just say this is a string, and then yeah, we are out of errors. And lastly, you can pass in the enabled. This doesn't help. Okay, so we have this address, function name, argument, ABI. What else is missing? I think that's all. So as usual, you can always export your data, right? Your error, there's an error, and this loading states and every other thing we need to export from this. Now, this doesn't end here. What this does is going to always fetch, it's going to try to fetch this data like from the contract. It's always going to make the call to the contract. And whenever you are ready to call that particular function in the contract, that's where you will now make use of the use right contract hook. So how do we do that? How we do that is you import the second hook, which is what use right contract. This time around, you are not passing anything as an argument to the use right contract. Where do you pass the necessary data? Now, use right contract as a write contract and write contract async. What is the difference between both of them? Write contract async is used with promises. So if you want to use your promise to wait for the transaction to go to load and then wait for the response from the transaction at that particular point, you can make use of write contract async. While write contract doesn't involve promise, it doesn't involve asynchronous waiting and the rest like that. But this write contract async involves you waiting for it asynchronously for the response and getting that response. Since we'll be making use of the write contract async. Now, the next thing is what? We need a button that whenever the user clicks on send token, would now call the contract with the address and the amount the user has typed in at that particular point. How do we do that? So we create a new function which is called undo transfer, right? Or undo submit or whatever. So I'll just do undo transfer. And since this function is going to make a asynchronous call, I would pass in async to the function. Yeah, our arrow function. So how do I call this write contract async? What happens is I would create, so I can easily do await write contract async call, but this time around, you see it throws an error. Why? Because it expects an argument, 1 to 2 arguments. So what is needed at this particular point is this data from your simulate contract, you need to pass it to the write contract async. Or if you are going to make use of the write contract, the other write contract function gotten from write contract hook. So how do you pass this in? You pass in data dot requests, but now it's throwing an error. And why is it throwing an error? Notice there's a question mark which shows there's a possible scenario where this data can be undefined. What do you mean by undefined? That this simulate contract would make the call, and in a scenario where the call fails or returns an error, contract is going to be undefined. It's not going to assign a value to contract. So you need to undo cases where what if this contract, what if this data is undefined? So you can always probably make a new, you can always try to check if if there's a data dot request. If there's data dot request, probably you can throw an error or return an error or something like that, or you can just do return, right? Or you can use the exclamation mark If we use an exclamation mark, what this does is it checks data if data is a false value or a true value, right? If it's a true value, that is, there's data, it would now try to access request. If it returns a false value that is undefined also, it's not going to continue. So we can have this. So I can just assign this to a variable so I can actually get the response from it. Go to the log response, right? Yeah. And then we can also console the log the error from here. You can add that to your UI if you want. So this undo transfer, I'll create a button down here and name this send token. So we need to watch up. So on click, how do you pass your function to on click? For our front-end developers. How do you pass your function to on click? There are different ways to pass it. So there's someone just echo simple way. Right? So nobody knows how to pass your function to on click. How do you pass the function to on click? Props. No, it's not props you get to pass. The on click itself is a prop. So how do you pass? So Ade replied your arrow function templates. Yes. So that's one of multiple ways you can pass in this thing. So what it means is just like this on change. Notice this is an arrow function. And then you cannot pass in your function and do transfer like this. You get. This is one way to pass in the undo transfer. If your function doesn't have a prop that is not, if the function doesn't have a prop or has a prop that aligns with whatever parameter that is passed inside on click, you can easily just pass undo transfer here like this without invoking the function. This will still work. Or you can decide to use your normal function. You can even decide to call your function here like this to still work. This is how you write your normal function. So you can decide to still call it like this, or you can decide to use arrow functions, right? And as in this. There's also another method which is quite advanced for this class. But note that your click, it has parameters that comes with it. So you can always get that from event. And you can always access the event. So just like how in your input feed, you have all that. So you can always learn that. Yeah. Or create the function and add the name. Yeah, so Ade helped us with that. Okay, now we have this, our button that when the user clicks on the button, the undo transfer function is invoked. And what's happening inside our undo transfer? We are trying to call the contract that has been simulated already. And we are constantly logging the response to see if it goes through or not. We are also constantly logging the error from our simulate contract to see if there's an error. So we'll come back to our live application. We have error. So now notice we are getting invalid address error. Why? Address is invalid. We are passing an empty string because the user has not imputed its address. So let's pass in our address and see. And then value, let's pass in 20. Now we are no longer getting errors. Let me add a background color to our button so it doesn't look plain. BG is what? do 500 our day win per then. Okay, now, so we have a visible send token button. I believe, let me zoom this in. So what happens when now check our console.log? We are getting an error, which is I've not even called the contract, but because we are using this use simulate function, it's remember we said it gets to simulate your contract interaction first. So you know if there are possible errors or not. Now, notice I'm getting an error, which is the contract function transfer from reverted with the following reason: what is sufficient allowance. So throughout this bootcamp, I know we have interacted with ERC20 tokens. What has come across this error before? Sufficient allowance. Who has come across this error? Anybody online that has come across this error before? So I've all been sending tokens and they have been going without hassles or issues, right? Huh? You check your so use sufficient allowance is not about balance. If it's balanced, you if in fact if the user does not have up to the balance that you're trying to set, it will revert with an error, which is what error is it revert to this? There's another error for insufficient balance. You actually see that it's insufficient balance. So when we're talking about insufficient allowance, is that before you can send tokens, right, you need to give the user allowance, that is permission to send a certain amount of token. Now, that user is going to set it from his browser, like from his wallet. And you would pass in. So if this user, so if you allow the user to probably if the user does has allowance of 10 token, and then you're trying to transfer 20 tokens, it's going to fail. So if you want to transfer 20 tokens, you need to give the allowance of 20 tokens or above for that transfer to work. Now, this only happens when you are trying to use transfer from in our ARC20 contract. So how do we fix this error? So we fix this error by giving permission to the user. So we're going to increase the allowance of the user. The default is 0. So that means even if you do 1 token, you still get the same error. So how do we do that? We do that by, we can simulate another contract around, the function name is going to be approved, right? Now, how do I know that it's approved? If I come to our ABI and then let me search for approve. Now, what this approve does is that you're going to pass in the address. So you're going to pass in the address of the user you're sending it from. Because so it's just like this. You want to transfer, you have $100,000 inside of your account, and you want to transfer to your friend or whoever. Now, if you're going to transfer, if I click, probably you're interacting online, and if you click transfer, I need permission. You yourself, the bank is going to ask you for permission. Yeah, that of how much you want to transfer, and then it also asks you for other security. It gives you other security guidelines and stuff that you need before that transaction can be successful. So in like manner, for the security of tokens and all, the user needs to give permission that okay, this wallet can withdraw so and transfer it to this particular person. So that's where approve comes in. There's also increased allowance, but yeah, that's not a public function, I believe. So you make use of approve, and then Instead of our input, we have two addresses, which is address and that is the spender and the amount. So what we'll do is we'll come back to this. Notice we're getting TypeScript error. That's because we have two variables that is named data. So you see, you cannot declare block scope variable data. So we can just name this to approve data, right? Since we're, and then this is what approve error. And in here, we just need two arguments instead of three, which is what the spender. So we're going to leave the address of the person sending the money, which is address, and then the amount. So I would remove the two. So this is what we need: the spender's address and the amount you are trying to approve. Do we get that? Now, how do we call this and how do we proceed with this? So what's going to happen is, instead of our undo transfer, we're going to make two calls. Firstly, it's going to be to the approve function, and secondly to the transfer from function. So I'll just create this approve response, right? Is equals to await write contract async, and then approve data equals to requests. Now we have this. Now, when you're making asynchronous calls in JavaScript, React, if there's any error, usually what's going to happen is your application is going to break. You would see that this particular application is going to break. Okay, now let's try that and see what's going to happen. Let me call, since our simulate contract is returning an error, let me go ahead to call the contract, and then you will see that this undo transfer is going to break our application. Now, if let me enter the address. We have this, and then we have 20. If I call this, you can see I'm getting an error. The application has broken. In production, this is going to give a blank page, except you are handling error. So how do you avoid your application breaking due to errors that you cannot control? This error is something, especially if you are dealing with APIs, contract calls, and all. These are possible issues. It's something you have to deal with in every application you're going to build. So how do you undo this error? Can someone give me an answer? So how do you avoid your contract calls or even your asynchronous calls from breaking your application in JavaScript? Try and catch. Yes, that's correct. So there's a try and catch block in JavaScript. What this does is it's even inbuilt in VS Code. So what this does is you put your asynchronous calls inside of the try block. If there is going to be any error, it's going to return inside of your catch. So it's catching the error for you in literal sense. Now, whenever you use this, it's not going to break your application. Instead, you can now undo the error. Yeah, you can probably, if you have a notification component, you can now decide to go throw the error to notification and to display to the user. Or if you want to console log the error, you can always do that from here. So I'm just going to console the log or console the error, right? So it's going to show as an error in our console log. And then in here, I can copy this and paste this into our try block. So remember, we said we need to give approval to our contract. Approval to our spender first, so you can actually transfer the amount. So and we have simulated the contract for the approve, and we are trying to call the approve contract inside of our undo transfer function. So firstly, we have approve response. So I'll go ahead to try this now and see if it's going to work. So if I do send token, what's going to happen? Okay, yeah. So our MetaMask pops up. But now notice what we see is quite different. Our MetaMask is asking us to set a custom spending cap. So that is your wallet is going to, whenever you call this approve function, your wallet is going to pop up and then ask you that, okay, you are trying to give this platform or you are trying to transfer, so set a maximum cap that can be used from this third party. So I passed in that, okay, I need approval for 20 Next tokens, and you can see 20. So you can always increase this if you want. If you want to do maximum of your balance, you can increase the maximum of your balance. So because I called the function twice, you can see 2 transactions. So I'll proceed with this. And then to ask for gas fee, you can always approve. So let me go. Now, this, but it's not popping up our second contract because it's supposed to pop up MetaMask twice, right? One for approval and second for the transfer itself. So how do we do that? So because right now this isn't working. So what you can do is first response approval response is equal to this. So we check if there's an approval response or is that an error? Yeah. So there was an error. So if approval response, you cannot do this. So we'll wait for this to return a response value for us. And once that is done, since it's asynchronous, it's going to always come back and call this. And then once there's a response, we cannot call our contract. So I'll go ahead to send token again. So notice our console error that we have here, dot error. Inside of our console error, we can view every issue that we have. So there's a pending transaction on MetaMask. I would go ahead to approve that, approve, and then wait for. So now you see, we are getting the second pop-up. Transfer 20 next to so and so. So you would get the gas fee, everything. I believe you know to do this. And then since I'm console logging the error, we can see I'm getting this. Do we have any question? Is this too much to assimilate? uh, because so far we have seen how to read contracts, we have seen how to simulate a write contract, a write function, and then call that particular function. So the reason why you see we are doing 2 calls is because the transfer from needs approval before you can do. But in terms of other normal rights functions, you can just make 1 call and it will just ask for approval and you are done. You heard one? You heard of? So, okay. Should I go through it one more time? Those of us online, we're not saying anything. Do we? They are actually the read contract is independent of the write contract. The read contract is okay. So the read contract is you want to read your view or pure functions that has like a value, right? We know what pure and view functions are. And if you want to read a value from it, you can always use read contract to do that. Now, where write contract comes in play is when you want to make a payable, you want to call a payable or non-payable function, right? That mutates the data on the smart contract. That's where it comes to play. And reason why we are using this simulate contract first is to what? Is to simulate the contract interaction. And in scenarios where errors comes up or something, you can always undo that before calling the contract function itself. So to just go through the flow again, what's happening here is we are trying to read the contract of the balance of the logged in user. And how do you do that? You pass in the API of the contract you are reading from, and then the function name or the function name that you want to read at that particular point. Now, if the function requires arguments, you pass in the necessary argument. To read the balance of, it requires the address, right? So we are passing in the logged in user's address as the argument. And then this address is the address of the smart contract. Remember, we have smart contract addresses, right? Which you get from whenever you deploy your smart contract. We have that. And then we can now get the data, which we renamed to balance. And we have its loading state. This is a Boolean, true or false, which we renamed to read contract loading. Now, that's that for reading contracts. Now, moving on to you trying to call a write function. A write function is a function that mutates the data on this contract. It mutates this data or state on the contract. So, for example, you are trying to update a variable inside of your contract. I'm sure we are all familiar with mutating data in smart contracts, mutating data and states in smart contracts. So, if you want to call any of such functions, you make use of use write contract. But firstly, before you call the contract, you need to simulate the contract. You don't go ahead to call the contract straight up. Why? This simulate contract would it would validate the contract interaction first. And if there's any error, it's going to return the error for you. So you, before you even call the contract itself, you already know that this interaction is going to fail. Is it becoming clearer? So that's why you see we're making use of use simulate contract first. So inside the use simulate contract, that's where you pass in the necessary configurations, which is your ABI, your smart contract address, the function name, the argument, and all. So we are using to simulate contract, which is transfer from and approve. And reason being that, remember when we did just transfer from, we saw that it was throwing an error of insufficient allowance. And I explained that the reason why we are getting insufficient allowance is because we need to increase the allowance of the spender, that is the person sending the money. So it's just more like a security measure where before you transfer so and so, just like in the traditional sense of transactions, you need to approve. You that is sending the money need to approve that okay, the bank is permitted to remove so and so from my account and send to whoever you're sending it to. So that's what approval does. This approve function does. So I said, okay, approve me that is spending the money, and then approve this certain amount. So that's why you see in our arguments we're passing to. And I explained that how do you know the arguments you need to pass? That you come to your ERC20 ABI, and inside of it, you can see inside of the array is an array, the different objects. Each function and variable has its own object, right? Has its own entry. And inside of this, so for example, if this is another object. If I want to read this object, there's the input, there's the name. So the name of is what is approved. That means there's the approve function in our smart contract. So your smart contract, as the how the API is structured is your smart contract functions and variables. It gets to compile that and then create like interfaces for you where you can interact with. So it has the approve, which is the function name. This name is the function name you're going to pass. And then the input, this input is what you're going to pass inside of the argument, this argument here. So in here, we can see for transfer from, I'm on transfer from, right? Yeah, I'm on transfer from object. I can see the input requires three parameters. Firstly is what? From, which is an address, the data type of address. And then we need, the second one is what? To, which is type address, data type of address. And then lastly, we have amount, which is integer. So that's why if you come here and check our transfer from, we see I'm passing in three arguments, which is address, the person sending the money, and then form data dot address, the address which the user pasted, like imputed. And then lastly, the value, which is form data dot value, the amount the user wants to do. That's why you see here, I'm sending 20. I said I want to send 20 and to this address. So can we see? So that's why you see I have this following structure. Now, we have simulated the contract. And when there's no error, so you can see that firstly, I am calling the approver contract. So which is what? From our use write contract, I'm exporting write contract async. And then I'm now calling it asynchronously. That, okay, inside of our write contract async, I am passing in the approved data, which is approved data dot request. So if you want to see from this approved data, you can, there are also other parameters. There's approved data dot chain ID, approved data dot response also. No result. Approved data dot result, approved data dot request, approved data dot. So these are possible values you can get from this simulate contract. All right. So you can see I'm passing that to the right contract address. And once there's a response, so this use approval response. So I'm checking if there's a response. Now call the second contract, which is what? Transfer from. Do we get? Is there any question? Those of us online, do we have any issues, question? Right. Because from where we're moving on to uploading to IPFX. No, I'm not having another class. I did because of IPFX. Yeah, today. It's not uploading to IPFX is not hard. It's quite straightforward and simple. Any question? Okay, so in the absence of questions, let's take the next 2 to 3 minutes to regain ourselves so we can move on to uploading to IPFX. All right. So we would resume 11:42. Yes. Okay, cannot hear me. All right, no problem. Okay, so we'll be moving on how to upload to IPFX from our Next.js application. We have interacted with IPFX, I believe, and we have seen how to upload from the NFT storage dashboard. So now we'll be dealing with how to upload from our decentralized application. So we'll still make use of the same NFT storage, right? That's NFT.storage. Yeah. Please hope you can see my screen. I believe all of us created an account
Yes, I
with
can see your
NFT
screen.
storage. Oh, okay. We all created an account with NFT storage. So you can just go ahead to log in. I would make use of my GitHub login. Now, to upload from your decentralized application, there are two routes, which is through package manager. NFT storage has a package which you can install using your package manager, your yarn, PMPM, NPM, depending on what you are using. Or you can make HTTPS requests, right? That is your API calls. So what the approach we'll be using is through the package which NPM, which NFT storage has given to us. So firstly, you need the API key from NFT storage. Yeah, I've generated a key before. For those of us that have not generated before, you should see new key or create key. It's quite straightforward. So you can click on it and then it's going to generate a key for you. To copy this key, you can always click on actions, there's a drop down, and click on copy. Right. Now, once you copy this, you can come to your Next.js application and paste this here. Now, when dealing with API keys, it's not advisable that you create probably a variable and probably name it and name this. So you put this inside of a string. Now, this is not advisable in handling keys in general. Reason being that people can access your code online through GitHub whenever you push. And whoever has access to your code can easily have access to these API keys and can now begin to transact or even interact with using this key. So if you are dealing with sensitive API keys that probably for each call you are going to be billed, somebody can be using your account that you don't even know, and you'll be incurring the bill. Even if you're handling sensitive data like payments, right? Somebody with the API key can easily do an undo with your account or something like that. So it's not advisable to store your API keys like this. How then do you store your API keys? So there's what we call environment variable, right? In JavaScript. This environmental variable, you don't push this online. It's actually locally stored. For your CDNs, CDNs also provide environmental variables where you can now paste that. So that way they're actually secured. So inside of this env file, you can now create a variable. So how do you create variables in Next.js? So what you do is you name it next public. Right? So you use underscore to separate the words. And then after the next public, you can name it whatever you want to name it. So I can decide to name this what NFT storage API key. But make sure you add the prefix for next public. And after that, you can now paste your API key. So use the equal to sign to assign the value to the variable name. So we have this. So you can name this, you can do env.local. So reason being that you're trying to specify that, okay, this is for my local environment. So there's also env.production, env.development, is it development? There's env.production. So you can always name this that. And if you're collaborating with teams, so I believe for the hackathon, you'll be collaborating with other team members. How then do you share this? Since we said we won't push this online. So what you can do is you can create a .env.example or sample, depending on whatever name you want to do. So what you're just trying to, what you do here is you just specify that, okay, for this, we have this env file, and then just specify the data type. What you're just trying to say here is, okay, this is expecting a string. So whoever is your team member that pulls this code can now say that, okay, we need this for the application to run. And the team member can always come to request privately that, okay, I need the API keys, and then that can be shared in a private and secure manner. All right. So that's it. So even if we come to your git ignore file, notice the git ignore file it shows files that won't be pushed to your GitHub. If you check it out, on the default, you will see what env.local. So that's automatically is going to ignore this file for you, and then you don't need to push. So that's that for that. Remember yesterday I said node modules won't be pushed. So that's that for your React application. Now, the React on Next.js doesn't listen to env5. So whenever you make a change to your env file, you need to wait, actually listens. But if you are making use of React, just React, it doesn't really listen to env files. So whenever you make a change to your env file, you need to restart the server. You need to restart the server. How do you do? Just stop the server and then restart it, and then to bundle to compile with the change you made to your env file. So let's take note of that for those of us that would want to use just specific system. So I'll get rid of this variable. Now, how do I access the variable from my env file? What to do is what process.env. So this process.env is going to get the, so this process.env, so it's like the prefix, and then after that is a dot. Dot. You pass in, so you paste the variable name from here. So console.log process.env. So this process.env has access to the user's environment, that is your environment at that particular point, your system environment. So if it's your CDN, like where you're deploying your application to, it's going to have access to that CDN environment and get the env files. If it's locally, it's going to have access to your local environment and get the env files. So let's console log our env file and see if we would get our value. So I come to here, and then you can see the value in my console log. Console log, we're getting the value. All right. So what I can do is I can come back and assign this to I create a new variable outside of our component and name this NFT storage API key. Okay, let me use camel case capital letters. Which is equals to process dot this. So yeah, so we have access to our API key now. Okay. No, so on the Next.js React all comes with the config on the default. So you don't need to install it from scratch. Yeah, from scratch. Previous versions of React Native doesn't have env. You have to install that manually. And I think Node.js people, you guys have to install it. But for React and Next.js, you don't need to make any additional installation. You always have access to that and to always pick it up for you. All right. So we have done the setup for our API key. The next thing is we need to install the package. So we'll just go ahead and access the documentation. So how do you install this package? There's the npm install nft storage. For those using yarn package installer, there's nft add yarn add nft.storage, right? So depending on your package installer, you can always install it. So I would go ahead and copy this because I'm using npm as my package manager, right? Yeah, package.log. So I'll just create a new terminal, copy and paste npm install nft.storage. Going to install, yeah, and then it's done installing. You get. Now, so with this, you have your NFT storage installed in your decentralized application, your application at this particular point. So the next thing is you import NFT storage from nft.storage. This is how the import looks like. NFT storage dot nft.storage. Very good. So once you're done with that, you initialize by calling the new class, which nft storage dot. So you can just create a new variable and then name this nft storage like this. And then you can say nft. Sorry. So you initialize the class, which is new NFT storage, and then pass in the token as the parameter. Now, when you pass in the token as the parameter, notice we are getting a TypeScript error. And the reason why we're getting the error is because of a reason. Now, whenever we are accessing env variables, like our environmental variables, is on a default is going to be a string or undefined. So TypeScript cannot infer that, okay, since remember I said it doesn't have access, like our application doesn't necessarily like compile with env, you need to restart the server or so it just gets assumed that okay, this is either a string or undefined. Now when I'm over on this variable, we can see that const NFT storage API is what? A string or undefined. That's a union type like this. The line in between is a union type, which shows like or. So and our NFT storage is expecting a string, just a string without undefined. And that's why you can see type, if you over on the error, you see what? Type string or undefined is not assignable to type string. Then specifically underneath, you see what? Type undefined is not assignable to type string. So who can tell me how to fix this error? Who can There are different ways to fix the error, as usual. But who can say how to fix the error? Who can just specify how to fix the error? Yeah? No. So it's not a good practice to paste API keys directly in your application. You need to pass them through the env files or through secrets. There's also secrets. And so how do you fix this error? Right. So there are two ways. Huh? Is what is a string, but whenever TypeScripts are reading env file variables, it reads them as string or that is, it could be a string, it could be undefined. That is, user there's a possibility where the user will not pass the value. So it's a different case where if you initialize a variable to string, it knows that okay, that's going to be a string throughout that variable's lifetime. But yeah, there's an uncertainty where it's not sure if there's a value passed or not. So that's why we're getting this error. Now, since let me see, let me check if there's a so to fix this error, this TypeScript error, there are two ways. There's the or. So you can easily say our API key is this or an empty string, right? That is the error has gone. So this is, you are trying to say, okay, this is string or undefined. So now this or runs whenever this is undefined. So whenever you do or in JavaScript, is that if the other one is a false value, that is if it's false or undefined is going to be false, then this should now be the new value of the variable. So going through this logic, it means if our API key from our env is undefined, then return an empty string. So either way, it's still going to be string. There's no undefined value that's going to be returned. Do you get the logic behind that? So you can do it this way, or you can initialize. So how do you pass dynamic values to strings in JavaScript? Yeah? You want to pass a dynamic value to a string in JavaScript. How do you do that? Template literals, right? Use template literals, which is your backtick on your keyboard. So if I want to pass in JavaScript, if I want to create a normal static variable, what do? I do like this, token, right? This will return token. But if I want to pass a dynamic value to a string in JavaScript, you make use of your backticks. And then inside of your backtick, you do this, you put your dollar character and then your curly braces, and then pass in the variable name or function name that you want to pass. and then we have token. So you can see, cannot find name token. That's because we don't have a variable named token. So this is how to pass dynamic values. So in scenarios where you don't know what, probably the value you're getting is from the backend. And you want to, let's okay, the backend is returning a user's first name and last name. And you want to pass that first name or last name to a string. Now, you cannot encode it because you don't know what the backend is passing at that particular point. Because the backend can return king for user A, for user B, it can return Ray. So how do you do that? So what you do is you just pass in, probably the whatever the backend is sending is stored inside user variable. You cannot pass in user dot first name here. And then inside of the string, whenever you render the string or console log the string, you will see the user's first name or last name. So either ways, you can do that. You can just do a string and then pass in this. So the issue with this is this would work. That's because you are passing in a backtick, and that backtick means it's a string. And then inside of the string, you're not passing a dynamic value, which is our env, our environmental variable. So automatically it's a string. It's not going to know it as undefined. So now we have initialized our NFT storage. How do we store data? So this class is supposed to be for 3 hours, right? Yeah. So we still have time. All right. To store data or to upload data to our storage is quite simple. Let's create a new function. And inside that function, let me just add a comment of upload data to IPFS. So I'll name this function undo upload to what IPFS. Going to be an async not call. Now to undo this, so you will try to access the NFT storage that you have initialized up here. So access this, you can do NFT storage dots. Now you can see different methods and functions that you have access to. But primarily, what we'll be dealing with is what? Storage. We want to upload. So we would make use of what? Store. And then you invoke the store. Now, inside of this store, you cannot pass in the metadata of what you want to store inside of the IPFS. But you need to pass in these necessary things. Name, right? As a string, description, image. I believe image will throw an error because we're not passing in the right data type. Then there's options for properties too. So if you want to add extra properties, you can always make use of properties, but I'll comment that out for that. So this is what is necessary for you to store and to upload to NFT storage at PFX. So I can decide to name this what my cats. To store a black, and then instead of image. So if you want to pass an image, you need to pass it as a file. How do you pass in image as a file? So you do image file is equal to new file. This is a JavaScript class. So this class, so you now pass in the different necessary arguments. So it requires 2 or 3 arguments. The first one is the file itself. Then the second argument is the name of the file. and the third argument is the type of file. So now for this, let's make this dynamic. What do I mean by let's make it dynamic? Let's make it to be that is the user that would upload, that the user will supply the image, supply the name, supply the description. All right. So I am making all of this dynamic because as front-end developers, everything you're going to do it has to be dynamic. It has to be that the user operating your centralized application would have to supply most of all this data. So I'm trying to just show how we can always do that as developers, front-end engineers. So can someone just give me a quick breakdown of how to make this dynamic? Just a quick breakdown of the flow. We have done a similar flow previously when we were trying to send token. So it's just quite similar. It is actually similar. Huh? If somebody online should speak for us, it's like everybody online has been quiet.
Yeah, we are here. We are here. Yeah.
Yeah, so I said somebody should just give me a quick flow of how to make this dynamic. So I want it to be that the user will supply the name, the user will supply the description, and also pick out an image from the user's system. Somebody online, do you have an idea of the flow?
Okay, I have to unmute them. I'm coming.
Oh, okay.
So if you want to talk, just raise up your hand. I will unmute you.
So please, you want to speak just. Okay, seems like Ade wants to speak.
Okay, sorry, it's not like I want like, but firstly, my screen is just showing the Explorer tab. I don't know if there's something I'm supposed to be seeing differently. I'm not seeing. Then
What Explorer tab? Okay.
I'm just showing the Explorer, like the whole S-Lanes, the JSON, like the tab. I'm not seeing like maybe your or something. Oh,
What about now? Is it better? Can you see it?
okay, I can see your screen now.
See it
So
now?
now I can see the screen now. So can I like get the question again now?
Okay, I should repeat the question. I didn't get you.
Yes.
Oh. Okay, so what I'm trying to say is to upload to our IPFS, when you initialize the NFT storage, you have the store method, right? And inside of the store, you have to pass in the name, description, and image. Right now, I am encoding the name, description, and image. I want to make it dynamic.
I get your question now.
I want to make it. Yeah, so I'm asking, how can I make it dynamic? The flow, just like give me a
Yeah,
map.
I think the basic method is to like save them in a state. So we have an empty like, new state. We have an empty state. So when you update whatever you want to like update, it gets implemented in the name here. For example, like the normal set name set name now to have our name here, like the when you update from your input or something. I think that's like the basic is it's not something I don't think it's except maybe they're expecting something else. I don't know, maybe but that's like the basic.
That's the answer. That's the answer I'm expecting. It's a quite straightforward and simple flow. What you do is you create a state, and then your state is going to undo the form inputs, and then you upload that state. So how do you do that? You create another form data, which is use states, and then in here we need what? We need the name, which is going to be, we initialize this to an empty string. We need description, initialize this to an empty string, and then we need image. So now image, we need it as a file. How do we initialize image? Since we're not sure of the value, we can initialize this to null for now. So whenever you're uploading, you do your validations and all. So we can name our states storage data, and then we have set storage data. Now we have this. To continue, I'll just create a new section in our application and then name this what? Upload to IPFS. So there's an error somewhere in the code. Okay. Because I'm not passing an image, the whole thing is broken. Let me just comment everything and come back to it. I'll upload to IPFS, but we need to connect our wallet. So this section underneath, that's where we'll be working from. We need 3 inputs. Input 1 is what? Name. So I'll do place so that I enter name. Input 2 is what? Description. So do enter description. And lastly, we have image. So do select image. How do we create a file upload? Right. This type for input is going to be what? File. So we are specifying that okay, this input field is going to be a file input field. We want to upload files. Now, we can also specify. We can be like specific of what file we want. And since it's just image, because when you specify file as an input field, you can upload PDF as a file. You can upload spreadsheets, documents as a file, images as a file. But when you're dealing with images, you need to specify that, okay, only accept image. How do you do that? You do image slash PNG, image slash the image type you want. You can also do image slash JPEG, right? Image slash JPG. So you are saying, you're telling this input field that should accept only this type of documents. Now, let me save and come back to our application. We have this. Let me grab them each down containers. Right. We have normal input for name, we have input for description, and then we have for file. If I click on choose file, it's going to pop up your file, your local environment, right? But notice it's only images that has PNG that I can click. So that's how you specify that, okay, you want to upload an image. So let me just click this random image, which is a screenshot, and then build our name. Right. So to keep track of our components, our input field, what's to be done is we make use of onChange. And instead of unchange, we'll set our storage data, just like I did earlier on. We copy the previous value and then set the new, but this is for name. So do event the target value. So it's returning an error. That's because I need to get event from our unchange. Yeah. So this is how it looks like. Sorry a minute. Now, same thing for our description. I'll copy this, but change name to description. And for this, now, for images or for files in general, you don't use event.target.file to get the file itself. What you use is you use a different to see what the user selected. What you do is you access it from event.target.files. So let me console the log event.target.files for us to see. So I'll open up my console. Whenever I select a new file, and then so inside of our console, you see file list. This file list is going to come in as an array. And inside, you can see a file. You see it as file, right? So it's going to come in as a file with this structure, image type, the rest, and or like that. So what we're going to do is we're going to now set. So I'll copy this on change value. So
We're not seeing your screen online again.
oh, can you see it now?
Yes.
Oh, okay. So we are setting our image to the file, which is event.target.files. So I said the file comes in as an array. That's because you can select multiple files. But since we just want the first, we're just uploading one image, we'll just get the first index, which is 0 of the array. And then we send this. But we are getting a TypeScript error, which is because, remember, I set our default value to null. So it's reading image as null. And right now it's telling me I cannot set file to null. So what I'll do is, so what you can do here is you can just, so there are two ways in TypeScript. You can either change the type from here. You can set to name as file, right, or null. So if you do this, okay, yeah, so we do this, that error goes, but right now it's telling me event.target.files is possibly null. This value is possibly null. It could be null. So what you can just do is just add your, what's wrong again? Okay, that's because it's undefined. So for these types, the reason why I'm specifying these types is because when you're uploading your files, it could be that your file is empty. This first index is empty. So it needs to undo the error, like undo a scenario where it's empty. So what this question mark is doing is it checks if it's empty. If it's not, if this doesn't exist, it's going to return undefined. So that's why it was throwing error that you need to specify that, okay, this could also be undefined. So it could be null, it could be undefined, it could be a file. And so that's how we got to make our states, whatever we're passing dynamic. So in here, instead of passing in my cat, what do I pass in? Storage data dot name. Here, storage data dot description. And then for image, I'll pass in what storage data dot image. But it's going to throw an error. Why? Because it's a certain file, but passing in null or undefined. Now, when you are building your decentralized application, obviously you need to undo errors. Like you need to undo form validations. You need to know form validations. So simply what we can just do is what we can easily say if there's no storage data dot image, or there's no storage data dot name, or there's no storage data dot description, what should happen? It should be that it should alert the incomplete form field, incomplete form. So what's happening here is if the user has not imputed the name inside from here, or has not selected image, or has not selected description, we should alert incomplete field. So if I click, okay, we have not assigned this to a button. Let's create a new button and assign this button, this. Okay. So if I click, let's upload this. So if I click upload, I get this alert of incomplete form. So I need to impute all of this. So I'll go ahead to impute what's going to be the name? I'll choose King Next.js. This shows arbitrum uploads. And then I'll choose the file. Let me choose this file. And once I click on upload, so since it's asynchronous, it might take time to load. Okay, let me just assign that to a variable so we'll know when it's done. Also the log response. So I'll click on upload one more time. So once it's done, we'll see a response. And can you see our response? URL, you get the IPFS, the URL, the metadata URL, the data you sent, right? You can see the description, image, and then the URL. So let's go back to our NFT storage and check our files. What's the time? Time is 12:26. You can see we just uploaded this. Can you see that? We just uploaded this to our NFT storage, and we can see that we have this. So this is how you upload to IPFS. Any question? As I've said, if you want to add additional data, you can always pass them inside properties. So properties, you can now decide to say, maybe you want to add age, you can decide to add age, what have you, depending additional properties, but always add that inside properties. But that's how you write to IPFS and make those changes. Okay, so that was all for today. I would like us to please go through this and practice as much as you can. Yeah, but the code is on GitHub. I pushed already, so you can view all this, everything I've done today on GitHub. So please, let's go through it, and even the videos, once it's uploaded, for those of us that can rewatch it, let's try to rewatch and learn and keep practicing. So you need to practice over and over and over again for you to master all of this. Because if you are going to interact with Web3 technologies, with blockchain technologies, from your front-end application or decentralized application, you need to understand all of this and know how to handle these flows, this syntax, and the logics involved. All right. Thank you for joining. See you tomorrow. All right. Take care.